Ding, there we go. Ms. Rabine, I have 6 o'clock. Are you ready to roll?
I am.
Fantastic. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I will call the Missoula City Council meeting of October 5th, 2020 to order. I will note that there are a variety of ways to participate in this meeting. Ms. Rabine has put those on the screen, and we're happy to have you join us in this virtual environment. I will note that all council members, save Ms. Merritt, appear to be present this evening. And we have no minutes to approve, but we do have a committee schedule. Ms. Rabine.
Excuse me, so we only have Ms. Merritt absent this evening?
Correct.
All right, hang on just a moment. My software catch up. All right, so this week, city council committees will not be meeting. Next week, Monday, is Indigenous Peoples Day, so the city council will not hold a meeting. So we are setting up committee meetings for October the 14th this evening. Let me start some video here, that'd be nice. The Parks and Conservation Committee will meet on the 14th of October from 12:30 in the afternoon until 1 o'clock. Parks and Conservation will meet from 1:15 to 1:30. Administration and Finance Committee meets from 1:45 to 2:45. And Public Works Committee meets from 3 o'clock to 4:30. And all of those meetings are being held right here on Zoom webinar. And to find our agendas, you can go online at www.ci.missoula.mt.us. You can also Google the city of Missoula, it will be your top search result. Press on that meetings button in the middle of our website, and that will take you to all of our agendas. The links to join the agendas are on the very top of each agenda. And I noticed we do have a phone participant this evening in our lineup, or several folks who are attending our meeting, our webinar meeting via phone. If you would like to raise your hand when the mayor calls on you, or when the mayor calls for public comment, the way to do that is to press *9, and that'll raise your hand and let us know that you wish to speak during public comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any changes to the committee schedule this evening? Right, seeing none, we will move on to the public comment portion of our agenda. This is for comment on items not elsewhere on the agenda this evening. Any general public comment? I would remind folks to please keep their remarks to 3 minutes or less. And Mr. Larson.
Yes, good evening, City Council. This is Matt Larson, Ward 3. Just wanted to address some claims a little later on, and the 3D scanner as well. So I'll leave my time for that as well, but just wanted to make sure that everybody's staying safe out there, socially distancing, wearing masks. I've recently learned that our local prisoners at the jail are not issued masks, even though that's in the CDC guidelines. That's been confirmed by pretty much everybody in the jail, and they expect us to believe that there's zero COVID in the jail. Meanwhile, it surges in similar counties across the state. It's pretty interesting. But I guess we'll learn more about that later. I'd like to relinquish the rest of my time to anybody else who'd like to comment.
And also general comment this evening, Mike Keefe.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Engen. Missoula City Council, currently there's a proposal to eliminate the sale of electronic nicotine delivery systems. The reason the city states is the underage use of nicotine. Using this emotionally charged issue, the City Council seeks to ban the sale of these devices and liquids to the law-abiding consumer without addressing the issue they identify: the illegal underage use, possession, and purchase of nicotine, and the criminal act of providing to these underage persons. We already have laws in place to address the same issue at the federal level and in the form of the existing MCA. We must hold the criminals responsible for their crimes and seek to deter recidivism and new infractions. If the goal of the law is deterrence and rehabilitation, we must enable such actions by the severity of the penalty of the law. If instead we seek to penalize the persons who have committed no crime, I find that to be morally reprehensible and a violation of our unenumerated rights. To cripple an entire industry such as this one would send consumers back to the combustible tobacco, a death sentence for 2 of every 3 persons affected by this policy, and would create an unfair business practice limiting competition, violating antitrust laws. The ENDS industry has been persecuted in a modern witch hunt, suffering catastrophic losses in just the same type of attack from October 2019 to April 2020, where the state enforced a 4-month ban over 6 months. Most recently, the Economic Affairs Committee of the state legislature refused a similar proposal by DPHHS. Consumers of these products are substituting their nicotine use to get away from cigarettes, which kill 480,000 Americans annually and remain the #1 cause of preventable death. We have not yet seen this level of lethality in any other product. Cigarettes kill 2/3 of the persons that use them and remain legal for sale to adults. Alcohol kills 1/3 of its users and contributes to about 1/3 of driving deaths in Montana, yet it remains legal for the law-abiding consumer, even in schnapps, amaretto, and flavors such as strawberry whipped cream and apple pie flavored spirits. Excuse me. The consumers and businesses that have broken no laws will be the only parties penalized by this proposal. It will not create greater respect for the existing laws. It will not punish the guilty party and will not solve the black market problem. It would instead penalize the law-abiding citizens for the crimes of children. As we saw last year with the marijuana black market, reckless profiteering led to toxic heavy metal cadmium and counterfeit THC atomizers and the use of hazardous skin bleaching cosmetic agent vitamin E acetate. Removing safe legal options from the market will cause the same problems as we have seen with contaminated marijuana and even prohibition of the last century, where methanol poisoning killed tens of thousands. We saw the rise of organized crime and the black market flourished. That was an untenable position and prohibition was repealed. 100 years later, we are still seeing an emotional argument that holds the legal consumers responsible for the criminal actions of a few. There is a state initiative that would create legal regulated marijuana businesses, taking the revenue out of the hands of criminals, verifying the age of consumers, and provide safe legal options. Licensed, regulated business holds more hope for an end to the illegal drug use than the failed war on drugs of the past 60 years. Thank you. I'm sorry this was long.
Thank you, sir. And I'll just remind folks, if you're interested in the motion to set a public hearing, which is not the public hearing, on the question of sales of tobacco and vaping products, that's later on in the agenda. And additional general public comment, I have Steph 000.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank the City Council for their efforts in moving forward on the trapping legislation. I won't call it legislation, I'll call it the ordinance change. And I just wanted to express how important it is. Again, this is something that deals with public safety, and it deals with keeping people safe and their animals in our community. And as I mentioned the last time, this is kind of a PTSD issue. If you've ever encountered that, it's very dramatic, and it's something people just don't get over. I've encountered too many people who've been dealing with it. So I want to thank the council for their 11-0 vote, and I hope we can continue that process and finally get this resolved on the 19th. Thank you very much.
Caller, may I ask you to identify yourself for the record, please?
Stephen Capra, and I'm the Executive Director of Footloose, Montana.
Thank you, sir. All right, seeing no additional public comment this evening, we'll move on to our consent agenda. That agenda was approved by council and committees, and we save a little time on Monday evenings by considering these items all at once. Ms. Rabine will read the list of consent agenda items aloud, so those participating in the meeting will know what we're considering. We'll take comment on the agenda before we vote. Ms. Rabine.
Thanks, Mary. Again, we have 8 items on tonight's consent agenda. Let's see. The first item, as always, is to approve claims, which are the city's accounts payable. This week, they're in the amount of $1,633,590.07, and they're for checks that are dated tomorrow, October 6, 2020. Number 2 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a construction agreement with Neely Electric for electrical installation of a second aeration blower at Garden City Compost at a cost not to exceed $32,957. Number 3 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign the contract for construction of West Side Park Phase 1 infrastructure improvements in the amount of $137,530.60. Number 4 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement for engineering design services and construction administration for the Copper Street Alley water main replacement project at a cost not to exceed $72,180. Number 5 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement with Territorial Land Works Incorporated for the survey, engineering, design, and construction administration services for the North 5th and 6th water main replacement project at a cost not to exceed $104,125. Number 6 is to approve the Cowboy Flats Subdivision Phase 2 final plat. Number 7 is to approve and authorize the mayor to execute an agreement with Community Oriented Policing Services, also known as COPS, for a Stop School Violence grant in the amount of $43,679 with a $14,559 grant match for the police department to purchase upgrades to their Faro 3D scanner. And finally, folks, number 8 is an ordinance. We are doing first reading and preliminary adoption and setting a public hearing on October 19th, 2020 on an ordinance amending Title 12 of Missoula Municipal Code, creating a new subsection 12.40.035E titled Trapping on City Parks, Trails, and Conservation Lands, and amending section 12.40.080 to allow for restitution for injury or death of a pet, and authorizing the Missoula Parks and Recreation Department to spring, release, or confiscate animal traps or snares that are found within city parks, trails, and conservation lands.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any comments from council members or questions? Seeing none. Anyone in the audience interested in commenting? Mr. Larson?
Yes, thank you. Matt Larson again, Ward 3. Yeah, I just wanted to hear more about these Trout Unlimited payments that total over $550,000 for the restoration, I guess, of the Rattlesnake Creek. Seems like a lot of money. And then also these IT department charges are pretty like generically named. And I'm just unfamiliar, I guess, with what's going on there. But there's quite a lot of, annual true up software licenses from Dell Marketing, which is $151,000. And, just what is that? And what is also the Zoho Corporation IT department charge for $27,000 for the Manage Engine OP manager license? Yeah, didn't have time to research those, but those are pretty big, significant charges. And the Faro 3D scanner has nothing to do with school safety or preventing school violence. So I'm wondering why we're voting for this. It's over $60,000 roughly. It's grant money. I guess that's great, but it's just like, why is it that grant? You know, couldn't you pick from one of the other myriad of other grants? It's just it's somewhat offensive, I think, like to classify it as a school safety preventative measure. It's like more for traffic scenes and homicide investigations. So, I mean, that's my understanding of it. Again, just a simple person here, but it just doesn't have much relevance at all to the school system. So again, it's just like another offensive kind of like spending of money while school children don't have the necessary equipment and supplies that they need to conduct, you know, this remote learning that is required. And it's, yeah, it's again, it's the same day, different stuff. Thank you. Bye.
All right, seeing no additional comment, Ms. Anderson. Ms. Anderson, did you have?
I clicked the wrong button to unmute myself and different screens popped up. So I do want to comment on the mischaracterization of what that 3D printer and scanner is and the impact it will have on our schools. This will have a direct impact on public safety, especially for the school children, because it will make scanned 3D models of all of our schools and will help our first responders train to, in God forbid, a situation ever arises where they need to go into the schools, that they know exactly where all the exits and entry points are, that they can train accordingly, they can get aid and personnel where they need to be to save children's lives. This directly impacts public safety and the lives of our children. This is used to make 3D scanning models of our schools and so that first responders can train and know exactly what the layout of all of our school buildings and classrooms are and egress in and out points. And so this is an excellent use of that money. And I'm glad that the police department was able to get this grant because it will keep our community and the most important people, the children in our community, safer. So wanted to straighten the record on that.
Wow. Ms. Sherrick?
Yeah, thanks. I also wanted to just give a shout out to Trout Unlimited. The $450-ish thousand and the $100 and something thousand DNRC and FEMA grant that they received to remove the Rattlesnake Dam, and us being the pass through on that. So that has been a great project. I'm thankful to have partners like them in the community.
Right, seeing no additional comment or questions from council members, we will have a roll call vote on the consent agenda.
Okay, on the 8 items of the consent agenda, Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Basiga,
Yes.
Von Lossberg,
Yes.
and West.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That's 11 ayes and 1 absent.
And the consent agenda is approved. We have no comments from city staff, agencies, boards, commissions, or authorities this evening, nor do we have any special presentations. We have a number of public hearings. The state law and our own council rules set guidelines for inviting comment on a variety of topics. Following a staff report on each of these, we will open the floor for public comment. And in the case of all of these public hearings, public comment period and the public hearing will remain open until council takes final action, generally speaking, at the next council meeting. Sometimes, depending on schedules, it might be a little bit different, but the public comment period will remain open on all of these. Our first public hearing this evening is on the Remington Flats subdivision and rezoning, and Mr. DeGrand Creek.
Good evening, councilors, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to share my screen now and start a presentation. So the Remington Flats subdivision has several parts to it. There's annexation, there's an initial zoning upon annexation. You've already adopted a resolution of intention to annex the property and also give it an initial zoning of RT 5.4. And then there's also a rezoning and phase subdivision that is proposed, and we'll focus on those two elements tonight. The property is 20 acres in size. It's located in the Mullen Master Plan area to the north of several phases of the 44 Ranch subdivision. It's farmland bounded on the west by Chuckwagon Drive. Here it's shown as Roundup Drive. You can see George Elmer Drive over to the east just a little ways. And it's also north of the Heron's Landing subdivision, which is not shown in this picture, but it's to the south of the 44 Ranch. And we just, you granted preliminary approval to that subdivision just a short time ago. Again, tonight we're going to focus on the Neighborhood Character Overlay District, or the rezoning. And we're going to also focus on the phase subdivision plat itself. I mentioned that there is an annexation portion of it. You can see the subject property in the center of the slide with city limits bordering the property to the west and to the south. This is an annexation area A, which means that it generally follows the guidelines for annexation as set forth by City Council. In other words, it's an area that's preferred for annexation. The growth policy designation is residential medium density, and medium density in this case would be 3 to 11 dwelling units per acre. Surrounding land uses, you can see in the blue-gray to the west and to the north, that's the airport. Immediately to the north is orange. That's a community mixed use type designation, so a more intensive designation. And immediately to the south is the same medium density residential type designation. The subdivision proposes a density of 7.6 dwelling units per acre, so that fits squarely within the growth policy recommendation of 3 to 11 dwelling units per acre. This deals with the annexation of the property. Annexation state law and also our local regulations require consistency with at least one of these statements. In fact, I think this project complies with all three, but just for the sake of brevity, the project is consistent with the land use and zoning recommendations for the subject area as set forth in the growth policy. That's letter C down to the bottom, and that's what I just showed you on the previous slide. The Remington Flats Neighborhood Character Overlay would be a new zoning district that's available in Title 20. It would be established through this review process here and continuing on the 19th, the next council meeting. And neighborhood character overlay districts it's a tool that's set forth in Title 20 in our zoning that are overlaying on the base district. So in this case, we've got a residential or RT 5.4, which is a single unit and a townhouse unit or 2-unit townhouse district. This would expand that slightly. I'll touch that in just a second here, but the idea with these neighborhood character overlays is to either set a development pattern or preserve an existing development pattern. Where there are conflicts between the base zoning and the overlay would govern. And then this is not a new thing for the city of Missoula. There are several existing neighborhood character overlay districts already in effect. The Remington Flats neighborhood character overlay doesn't propose massive changes. It basically just proposes a slightly more intensive or a more dense development pattern than the standard RT 5.4 allows. The RT 5.4 allows, it's up to 2 attached townhome units. This neighborhood character overlay would allow up to 3 attached townhome units and have slightly smaller front setbacks, 10 feet instead of 20, except where a garage would abut the front property line. For zoning to be properly adopted, our local regulations in Montana law lay out specific criteria that you've seen, I'm sure, evaluated in detail in the zoning staff report. For a neighborhood character overlay district, the idea is, or one of the criteria is that this district would provide characteristics that would create an identifiable setting, character, and association. Again, what they're trying to do here is provide a particular development pattern on this 20 acres. To the south is the 44 Ranch development. That's a little larger lot development. To the north, I mentioned, is a mixed use growth policy designation. That's a more intensive designation. So this would be kind of a transition between the two. Single family to the south and more intensive, probably apartments and some community-centered businesses to the north. So this would, in my view, actually, it would really blend in. Wouldn't be much of a change with the development that's already existing and planned for the future. Neighborhood character overlay districts also need to be 5 acres in size. This one would be 20. And then the other criteria, such as growth policy compliance, the zoning securing safety from fire and other dangers, promoting health, safety, and welfare, et cetera. These are standard zoning criteria that are provided in our local Title 20 and also state law, providing adequate infrastructure, adequate light and air, et cetera. The staff report, again, evaluates these criteria against the project in detail. Probably don't have to, if you have any questions on them, I'm happy to go into them, but in the interest of time and the other public hearings that you have and other business, the findings are laid out in the staff report, and I guess that could probably suffice for now. And then moving on, probably to the more consequential decision is the subdivision proposal itself. So the subdivision is proposed to include 152 lots for single family, 2-unit, and also triplex type unit townhomes. You can see that there's a grid pattern that's proposed. There are streets to the south in the 44 Ranch subdivision that are proposed to be continued to the north through this subdivision. Up to the east, we have 2 roads that are east-west type roads called Winchester Drive to the north and Remington Drive to the south. These are proposed to continue to the east in an adjacent subdivision project that's forthcoming that we're working at right now at the staff level called McNett Flats. So, and then along the west boundaries, Chuck Wagon Drive, that's classified on our transportation maps as an urban collector, and that is proposed to provide access all the way down to Mullen Road to the south, and then eventually up to England Boulevard, connecting to the reserve to the east, and then Broadway to the north eventually. I mentioned phasing. There are 7 phases that are proposed. The pink phase would be first, and what they're hoping to do is develop a phase a year, and the phases vary between about 17 to about 25 lots, but they're hoping to take them in bite-sized chunks. So the pink phase would be first, then the red phase second, yellow third, green fourth, etc. One interesting thing to note is you can see in the lower left-hand corner or the southwest corner, that's a segment of Chuck Wagon Drive. Again, that's an urban collector that's proposed to connect, or actually does just about connect to Mullen already, but it's not fully built yet. And so the 44 Ranch subdivision and Heron's Landing are also required to make some contributions to this road becoming a full-scale urban collector. And this development also would have to participate, as identified in the staff report and conditions of approval. And the idea is that the developers of this project would pay a proportional share or a portion of the improvement costs. So what we at the staff level are proposing, and the planning board has seen as well, is that the developers would build the road base. Essentially, it's about 1,000 feet between where the road ends today and the southwest corner of this subdivision. So they build the road base in phase 1, and also pave that in prior to phase 2. But some other developers would contribute as well. So it's kind of a cooperative type project. And of course, councilors, feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have questions. The streets are proposed to be lined with boulevard type sidewalks with street trees, a landscaping plan. This is a very preliminary landscaping plan, of course, but a full landscaping plan would have to be, or is recommended to be, submitted to the Parks and Recreation Department and approved through their review processes prior to final approval. But sidewalks line all of the streets and connect to existing development to the south and proposed development to the east and eventual development to the north as well. One of the peculiarities of this subdivision is the Missoula Airport Authority is considering and is kind of planning for a long range for the future. And they're thinking about developing a second runway to the south or southwest of the current runway. And this property is located within a potential expanded, what do they call it, approach and departure area. And so, we at the staff level have been trying to think about how to address this situation. Of course, this is a runway that's not funded. It's probably it's a long range plan. Don't know that it ever will be built, but it could be built at some point in the future, but it doesn't look like for quite some time. And so the airport has expressed a little bit of concern about developing homes in this potential expanded approach and departure area. And the way that we've handled this in other subdivisions is to require what's called an navigation easement by developers. And what that means is the developer would dedicate an easement to the airport authority where it basically limits the height of structures, it limits the height of trees, things like that, so that there couldn't be an actual conflict with planes flying, but also makes future lot purchasers aware of the potential for noise, vibration, and things like that, and hopefully design their homes accordingly. So there have been questions at the council level in the Land Use and Planning Committee about how this is handled in other communities. Montana law provides communities and airports to adopt zoning actually to address the height of structures and certain construction type rules. I've been unable to find them here for the Missoula Airport Authority, but that's a possibility. Many other communities, many other airports have them, but in this case we don't. But I think, given the distance of the property from the airport, it's not as though there'd be a conflict with structural height. You've got single family residences, duplexes, et cetera. So it's, I don't think that's a major concern, but we've proposed that the subdivider provide notice in the covenants and dedicate an easement, navigation easement to the airport authority as a way to try to mitigate the potential impacts. There are several criteria under Montana law and also in our local subdivision regulations for evaluating subdivisions. They are impacts on agriculture and agricultural water user facilities, the natural environment, wildlife habitat, public health and safety, and others. These are also detailed in the staff report. We've evaluated them pretty closely. One thing I did want to point out, which came up at the Land Use and Planning Committee meeting, there is the property does have water rights. It was historically irrigated, hasn't been in several years, and the proposal here is to actually sever the water rights. In other words, remove them from the property as part of this subdivision, which is allowed in Montana law. And so I didn't actually include a condition requiring that, even though it was put in the, it was stated that this would be the approach in the application. So I'll get to it in a couple of minutes and show you the text, but I was asked to develop a condition to address that, and you'll see it here in just a minute. Going through these briefly, there are prime soils if irrigated on the property. That's a designation by the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service. And there are water rights associated with the property. However, this property is it's planned for residential development. It's planned for expansion. There would be impacts to agriculture. Certainly the land would be taken out of agricultural production in the future. But I guess, at the end of the day, that was the plan. That's the plan in the Mullen Area Master Plan. That's the plan in the growth policy that you have. So I think the impacts have already been decided that they'd be pretty limited in this case. In terms of the natural environment, wildlife and wildlife habitat, the property is, a farm field. It's kind of flat agricultural land right now. It doesn't contain wetlands, doesn't contain streams or, really sensitive environmental type receptors, doesn't provide winter habitat for elk or, things like that. So although there would be a loss of habitat, although there would be, a change in use, I think that the impacts of the natural environment, wildlife and wildlife habitat would be limited and would be acceptable through this subdivision. With regard to public health and safety and also local services, there's adequate circulation on the property, or that's proposed in the subdivision. City water and sewer can serve the subdivision. We've got police and fire that have commented on the project. And the fire department has actually signed off on or given a preliminary approval to the hydrant plan. We have nearby medical services, no natural hazards, no floodplain, et cetera. So I think impacts to public health and safety would be limited. Additionally, there is adequate access, emergency services. We talked about parks a little bit, and one of the comments, we've received 3 comments through Engage Missoula on this project. And I believe each of them, or at least 2 of the 3, talked about the lack of park that's proposed. And we had a discussion about that at the Land Use and Planning Committee meeting. So Neil Miner spoke at that meeting and then further clarified some of his comments in an email to Jordan Hess and myself. The proposal here is for cash in lieu or instead of parklands, and that's a proposal the developer is making. It's also supported by Missoula Parks and Rec, with the idea being there is a neighborhood park about 5.5 acres in size located just to the south of this one, within a quarter mile of all the lots. I'm sorry, within a half a mile of all the lots in the 44 Ranch subdivision, within a 10-minute walk. And so the idea is that cash could be donated from this development to meet the parkland dedication requirement to purchase facilities and also maintain that park in the 44 Ranch subdivision. What's required under our subdivision rules is 1.43 acres of land to be dedicated as parkland or cash in lieu. Now, you city councilors, you have discretion. You can decide whether cash in lieu is appropriate or not. And right now the findings of fact that you have in your staff report recommend approval of that and actually have a couple of findings saying that that's appropriate. If you find that it's not appropriate, if you want to do something different, if you want to require a parkland, you can do that, but we would need to change the findings in order to support that. It's basically, we need to have a legal basis for doing it. The findings establish that. So I just wanted to point that out to you. And then also another thing I wanted to point out is these are pretty small lots. And so again, 1.43 acres would be required under state statute and local regulations for parkland. And if you look at, I'm going to just go back, actually I'll go to the next slide. Look at the middle, this block right here, okay? 1.43 acres would be about 15 of those lots, and you've got 20 of them in that block. So if you were to require all parkland, for example, that would take away quite a number of lots within this proposal. So I just wanted to, if you wanted to discuss that in more detail, I'd certainly be willing. I'm sure the developer would too, but I just wanted to provide you with a sense of scale for what that might mean. Okay, then quickly on to the variance requests. There are 4 variance requests, and the first 2 have to do with block lengths. So our subdivision regulations have a maximum block length, so that would be, in this case, an east to west length of a maximum of 480 feet. Both this southwestern block and this northwestern block, the length is 540 feet, which is why a variance is required for this alignment. Staff has recommended approval of this for these 2 variances for a couple of reasons. First, you see this road coming out of the 44 Ranch subdivision that exists today, and Chuckwagon Drive is long planned to extend north. So essentially what we're doing is we're maintaining the existing development pattern if these variances are granted, as opposed to changing that. The alignment is a grid pattern, which is pretty functional. It's an efficient use of land. So that's really the primary reason. And also, I was thinking about the block length, and we discussed it at the Land Use and Planning Committee meeting. And then look back also at the Mullen Area Master Plan. And the way that is written is there's a block length maximum, but it's actually not block length, it's block perimeter maximum. So in other words, the length around the block. And there's no block here to the north, of course, because there are no lots here yet. But to the south, there are in the 44 Ranch subdivision. The maximum block perimeter that's proposed in this area in the Mullen Area Master Plan is 2,000 feet. And today I measured this out, and it's about 1,500 or 1,600 feet around this block. So I know the Mullen Area Master Plan is not yet adopted, but it's just, I wanted to provide you with a point of reference that this would comply with the Mullen Area Master Plan if that were in effect today. The developer is proposing some mitigation here. You can see this orange line. That's a proposed 10-foot pedestrian access easement with a sidewalk built within it to connect to future development in the future, because we're assuming, I guess, that these roads would be continued to the north and that there'd be a similar pattern. And then moving on to the next variance request is number 3. And the developer has requested the streets within the subdivision, with the exception of Chuckwagon to the west, are considered low density urban local streets. And that's a classification that's based on traffic volumes. The subdivision regulations require a right-of-way width of 70 feet for those types of streets. The developer here is proposing 64-foot right-of-way instead of 70. Within that right-of-way are proposed to be streets built entirely to city standards with 10-foot 10-foot travel lanes, 8-foot parking lanes, curb and gutter, and then boulevards and sidewalks with an additional 2-foot area on each side of the sidewalk for maintenance. And one thing, so in other words, the street can comply with our street requirements. It's just the right of way that's slightly narrower. And one thing I did want to point out that we discussed at the Land Use and Planning Committee meeting is the adjacent development to the south, 44 Ranch, that has 60-foot rights of way for these type of streets. And also the Heron's Landing subdivision was just approved with 60-foot rights of way as well. The developer's proposing a slightly wider right of way here for snow storage, I think primarily. So I think the developer thinks that this would be a more functional approach. But I just wanted to point out that in terms of consistency, if we're going to not, if you counselors are not going to approve the variance, I think we need to think about why and come up with some rationale to do that. Because right now the recommendation is for approval as discussed in the staff report. And then finally, the last variance is the right-of-way width for urban collectors, which here it's shown as Roundup Drive on the west, but that's also Chuck Wagon. In our subdivision regulations, the right-of-way that's required is 90 feet. Roundup Drive is an existing right-of-way that extends from Mullen, and the right-of-way that's publicly dedicated already is 80 feet instead of 90, all the way from Mullen up to the southwest corner of the subject property. On the subject property, there is an existing 40-foot right-of-way. But off the subject property to the west, this is airport-owned land, there is no right-of-way that's dedicated. And this is a point of negotiation between the city and the airport that needs to take place. And so the developer here is requesting to build essentially a portion of the road that would serve the subdivision, and then in the future, as additional right-of-way is acquired from the airport authority, that road could be built out to full collector standards. So here's what the developer is proposing on site, and it's the right-hand side of this diagram. So it's a 40-foot right-of-way with 2 10-foot travel lanes, curb and gutter, 10-foot boulevard, 5-foot sidewalk, and a little bit of space for maintenance. And so the idea is when the additional 40-foot right-of-way would be required, and that's on the left side or the west side from the airport authority, then the road could be built out to full standards to serve future development. So this is a hardship that's not really created by the applicant. It's an existing situation, and the applicant is requesting a variance for the right-of-way for 40-foot collector with half-street improvements. There are several conditions of approval. They're all, I think, fairly standard. You know, again, I just mentioned half-street improvements for Chuck Wagon, other streets built to city standards, contributions or impacts to streets and intersections that are off-site, cash in lieu of parkland, the navigation easement, et cetera. There are a couple of changes to the conditions that are now proposed as they're laid out in your staff report. So the staff report discusses the intersection. It's finding number 14 and condition number 9. It discusses improvements to the intersection of Mullen and Chuck Wagon. And it actually has a dollar amount that the subdivider would be responsible for. And so the idea here is under Montana subdivision law, subdividers can be local government can assess subdividers to pay for it's called capital facilities, or in other words, infrastructure type improvements that are made necessary by the subdivision. So there's an existing issue right now, an existing condition that warrants attention, and that's the intersection of Chuck Wagon and Mullen. I think it's already pretty congested, and it's anticipated. All the traffic impact studies for developments in this area say that it's going to become a problem. The level of service will drop below acceptable levels at some point in the future here when these projects are built out. So what we're trying to do at the staff level and at the planning board level is come up with a way for the developers to pay a proportionate share. And so we had originally proposed this condition that struck out. But what's happening now is, in speaking with Jeremy Keene, Public Works Director for the city of Missoula, the plan here is to come up with an impact fee area, an area where we can look more closely at development that's proposed, at trip generation, and at apportioning the costs for improvements among different developers. And so that's in the process right now. It's probably about 4 or 5 weeks out still, but we're in the process of it. So Jeremy sent out a note yesterday to me and a few others estimating that development in this area, it appears, though, we're looking at the range of between $1,500 and $2,500 per dwelling unit that could be paid at an impact, in an impact fee for some of these improvements that are made necessary to kind of fill in the gap that because we didn't receive the most current build grant allocation, there's going to be a gap there. And so in any event, we're looking at an alternate way as an impact fee or a latecomer's fee, as opposed to requiring a condition on certain subdivisions. So I'm asking you to remove finding number 14 and strike condition number 9. And also, 2 additional conditions are proposed. I mentioned the water rights severing here earlier, and so it's fairly standard language. You know, the subdivider has proposed to sever water rights from the property, and this would be required prior to final plat filing of the first phase, and then also that this kind of standard statement be provided on the plat and in the covenants as well, just in case there are taxes associated with water that lot owners would end up having to pay. We kind of want to put them on notice if that's a possibility. And then the second one has to do with the Chuckwagon Drive offsite improvements. I mentioned earlier in talking about the phasing plan that Chuckwagon Drive ends about 1,000 feet short of this property or south of this property. So the developer here has proposed to do a couple of things. In phase 1, install road base that could provide essentially for construction traffic to get back and forth and build out the first phase. And that prior to the second phase, that there's actually paving that would occur. Again, I mentioned this extension of Chuckwagon is going to be done in conjunction with several other developers as well. So the timing is a little bit uncertain about who's going to pay for what, but the developer here would be on the hook for at least a portion of those offsite improvements. So I'm asking that you adopt this condition as well. And as we talked about at the Land Use Planning Committee, we're recommending approval of an ordinance to establish this neighborhood character overlay zoning district and to rezone the property with that neighborhood character overlay. I'm recommending approval of the variances for block length, recommending approval of the variances for right-of-way width for both the local urban streets and also Chuckwagon, which is a collector. And then finally, recommending approval of the Remington Flats phase subdivision and application based on the findings of fact and subject to the recommended conditions of approval as amended by City Council. And I think the only other question that really came up at the Land Use and Planning Committee that Council asked me to look into, I believe it has to do with schools and impacts on schools. Another comment that's come in at least a couple of times is with this and other subdivisions is, can the school district handle the new students that might come in? And so look back at the school district, the principal's letter or superintendent's letter today. It was for Heron's Landing, but it also went out for the Expo Parkway project. So it's, I think, standard language at this point, saying that there's capacity right now for about 280 new students, and that over time, essentially, facilities could be built to accommodate new students. And then Jim Nugent, city attorney, pointed out via email to me that there is an option. You know, parkland, actually, you can require with consent of the school district that parkland be dedicated within a subdivision and dedicated to the local school districts. So that's just something maybe to keep in mind, probably not for this subdivision because the school district hasn't requested it and a school is not planned for this area, but I just wanted to inform you that that's an option, you know, in the future. You have the authority to require, instead of the parkland dedication going to the city, it could go to the school district instead, but that requires consent, of course, by school district and your action. So that concludes the presentation. Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. DeGrandpre. I will now open the public hearing on this subdivision and rezoning. If anyone would care to comment, you are welcome to do so now. And that public hearing will again remain open until council's next regular meeting. And on the subdivision, Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson? You're on mute, Mr. Larson. All right, we will move on. Seeing no additional folks among the attendees interested in commenting this evening, I will keep that public hearing open and we will move on to the next one.
Star Trek.
And our second public hearing this evening is on amendments to Title 20, the City of Missoula Zoning Code. And our staff report this evening comes from Ms. Gress.
Okay, now can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, perfect. Was getting no reaction. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Thank you very much. So good evening. For the record, I am Jen Gress of Development Services. And tonight's presentation is the Title 20, excuse me, the Title 20 update amendments, and I'll go over our process. I'll give a quick overview, cover some key topics, and ask you to adopt an ordinance amending Title 20. So the process included an initial meeting with the Land Use and Planning Committee to discuss the proposed amendments generally, receiving approval to continue with the project. Agency and public comment was requested beginning June 16th, along with several other outreach methods. Because of the current COVID situation, the time to collect comments was extended from the usual 2 weeks to a month. Planning Board held a public hearing on August 11th. Staff attended the August Riverfront Leadership Team meeting and updated LUP, who set a hearing. And we're here before you tonight for that public hearing, requesting approval of proposed changes to Title 20. Notification of this year's update items, pardon? Notification of this year's update items included an agency and interested party memo sent out June 16th. Project information has been included on the city's webpage, which included the city's new Engage Missoula website. You have 2 reports attached to the referral if you're interested in those. Information was included on the front of Development Services webpage. The city's news flash option was used twice to notify the public, as well as the city's Civic Send program. The Office of Neighborhoods sent notice through their contacts. Legal ads have appeared in the Missoulian, and information was shared at the monthly development community meeting that Development Services holds. The proposed 2020 Title 20 update amendments are subject to and meet the review criteria stated in Title 20, which is section 20.85.040G, zoning amendments review criteria, and as described in detail in the attached staff report. So as noticed above, comment regarding the proposed amendments was solicited and the information was hosted on the city's new Engage Missoula website. Most comments received were provided through Engage Missoula, with a few coming directly to staff. In the referral, you can find the 2 separate reports from the Engage Missoula site, and I'll provide a summary of comments touching on those that were elevated in conversations. Both Planning Board and the Land Use and Planning Committee took into consideration all of the comments that were received. Most comments received were regarding changes to the ADU section, and of those comments, about half were in favor of and half were against the proposed changes. Most comments received in support of the ADU amendments supported all of the proposed amendments and referred to the need to provide new and affordable housing opportunities throughout the city. Other comments received were in support of specific amendments. Staff did receive support specifically for the parking reduction from the director of the Parking Commission. And we also received support from the Housing and Community Development Office. So those against expressed concerns ranging from disagreement with every ADU amendment to individual sections of the amendments. Staff received comment expressing concern about the removal of the requirement that an applicant notice surrounding parcels of their intent to have a tourist home. Planning Board discussed this amendment at length and moved to strike it, which resulted in a removal of the proposed amendment from the Title 20 package and a retention of the current language requiring the applicant to notice surrounding parcels. Land Use and Planning Committee considered the planning board recommendations and concurred. So that amendment has been removed from the draft ordinance. Planning board also discussed the proposed changes to the conditional use process and recommended language changes. When the Land Use and Planning Committee reviewed the amendments, they recommended a different approach. So there'll be more about these amendments at the end of the presentation. This year's package will implement portions of the housing policy, mostly around ADUs. Amendments will create consistency between the planning, engineering, and building divisions. Other amendments will consolidate the notification process and make it more effective. And as always, we'll address regulations that no longer apply or are inefficient or in error. I'll be describing the amendment ideas in 6 groupings. Because we had committee discussion regarding the specific amendments, and this is a long night for everyone, the amendments will be presented in a brief format. Our first group is implementing recommendations from the Missoula housing policy that address changes to ADU regulations. So in 2013, the City Council established Ordinance 3493, establishing standards for developing new ADUs with the intent to allow small-scale accessory residential that typically have minimal impacts in our community, while also providing new housing options. In spring 2018, the Title 20 was updated to remove the conditional use process for detached ADUs, making ADUs possible by right in all zoning districts. And over that timeline and up to this year, the city has seen an increase of 3 to 4 ADUs coming online per year, with a current total of 30 ADUs having been permitted. So tonight you're considering updating the ADU standards in order to promote greater access to this building type as an affordable and sustainable housing option. Recommended changes include removing the annual permit requirement, removing owner occupancy requirements, reducing required parking, removing the minimum square footage, and increasing the maximum height. A couple of housekeeping amendments will include removing the language permitted by right. As I noted a minute ago, ADUs were allowed in all zoning districts in 2018, so the term is no longer needed. In addition, the code includes language that allowed a grace period for illegal ADUs to meet zoning standards and register without penalty. And that grace period has expired and the language is going to be removed. Proposed amendments to the off-street parking schedule reflect changes to the definition of affordable housing and remove the required parking for ADUs, allowing Title 20 to support Missoula's adopted housing policy. Language is proposed that will allow an existing accessory structure that may be non-conforming because it's placed inside the setback to be replaced, and it will allow existing or new structures an opportunity to expand along that established building line subject to conditions. The amendment is proposed to support the use of existing structures when developing an ADU. All other standards in the ADU chapter will continue to apply, and the proposed language is modeled after the approach we took for improvements to existing non-conforming primary residences. Changing the term from subsidized to affordable housing as it pertains to current parking calculations means it should be more available to more housing projects and affects the code in 2 places, the parking and planned unit development chapters. Together with housing and community development, staff created a local definition of affordable housing that links to the tiered affordable housing incentive program established in the housing policy. And this definition will enable housing and community development to create programs that are nimble and responsive to the unique needs of Missoula, rather than being held to a federal definition of subsidized that does not represent the housing challenges facing Missoulians. And creation of the new affordable housing definition will require other amendments through Title 20 to make the regulations consistent, including an amendment in the PUD chapter and the other amendments discussed in the parking chapter previously. And I'm going to have Montana James take over this and give you a little bit of background with the ADU stuff.
Good evening. Montana James with Housing and Community Development, as Jen said. So all the proposed changes in this round of the Title 20 updates are supported by our office, making, Missoula's housing policy, a place to call home, was developed over a 2-year period, during which we relied heavily on robust community engagement and really tapped the experts locally on housing, finance, construction, and code here in Missoula. And the resulting policy included over 30 specific recommendations to improve housing affordability here in Missoula. So the ADU changes to Title 20 that you see before you are the direct result of that local community process. Accessory dwelling units play an important role in our strategy as a city to improve housing affordability. They provide a diverse and flexible home type that can meet some really unique needs of our residents. They allow folks to age in place and stay in the neighborhoods that they know and love. They also enable Missoulians to live at home while they attend college or help young families pay off their mortgages more quickly, to name just a few. We can also leverage ADUs in future housing policy program work, including to support voucher holders and to incentivize more affordable rentals. Nationally, ADUs are widely accepted as really important to creating more diverse, healthy, and equitable neighborhoods and cities. ADUs are a key policy interest of the Invest Health Initiative, of which Missoula is a member, as well as AARP and some other national organizations. So in addition to coming from those local conversations that we had as we developed the housing policy, these specific proposed amendments related to ADUs are also agreed upon as best practices by these national organizations to expand access to ADUs and in order to reach health equity, housing affordability, and climate goals. For the city, ADUs present both financial savings as well as more efficient use of infrastructure. By utilizing existing city infrastructure, ADUs combine an ecological and financial benefit when compared to the more costly infrastructure expansion on the urban fringe. The deployment of ADUs in existing neighborhoods also reduces the need for auto transportation, which is a source of about 25% of greenhouse gases, and supports alternative modes of transportation like walking, biking, and public transit. So the wider adoption of ADU development represents a housing approach strongly aligned with the city's focus inward growth policy, and it supports the explicit housing policy goals and future program development that our office has identified. For all of these reasons, the Office of Housing and Community Development strongly recommends adoption of the Title 20 amendment package as proposed here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Montana. So going on with our amendments, we come to the coordination section, and amendments are being proposed to Title 20 that will create consistency with existing engineering terms and address potential amendments between the engineering and building divisions, which will shift accessibility review to the building division. There are 3 proposed amendments that will change terminology in specific locations of Title 20 from driveway to driveway approach to match terminology used in engineering, depending on whether the area is being regulated is in the right of way or on a private parcel. And those are found in the chapters that cover overlay districts, use and building standards, and parking. References to engineering review of accessibility requirements will be replaced with a reference to the building division because of proposed amendments to engineering and building rules. And the building division has the ability to review accessibility issues through the International Building Code. And those amendments can be found in the parking chapter. The parking chapter will also be amended to clarify when a driveway is involved in a project, the engineering division must approve the driveway prior to issuance of any zoning compliance permit or building permit. And that's made by adding the reference to building permit. The second amendment will remove duplicate language addressing maximum grade of a driveway from Title 20 while retaining it in engineering. So the next topic is the sign chapter, and the dynamic display sign section lists districts where the signs are permitted as well as prohibited. And it was brought to staff's attention that neither section included the B districts. After researching the language, staff created a zoning officer opinion addressing the gap and permitted the dynamic display signs in B districts along principal arterials. Proposed amendments will clarify where dynamic display signs are permitted by incorporating zoning officer opinion 20-01, and will also remove the prohibited locations section in the sign chapter, since we also have a where allowed section, and that's focusing the regulations on where the signs are permitted. Amendments and will clarify building graphics only need to be reviewed by one decision-making body. And then the last change will remove the requirement that staff provide identification tags with every sign permit. The identification tags have not proven useful, and so the language will be removed. In an effort to create greater consistency between process, notice requirements are being updated and consolidated into a new notice section in Chapter 2085, Review and Approval. This action will consolidate and clarify the notification requirements for all types of projects administered by Title 20, resulting in ease of use and consistency of notification procedures. A majority of the changes regarding notice will be taking the notification pieces out of multiple Title 20 sections and reorganizing them into a new notice section in the review and approval chapter. Additional language changes will include adding a quick reference table and an intent statement. Notifying owners within 150 feet of a proposed project will be made consistent. Newspaper notice will be made consistent across all processes. Certified mail will be removed while retaining first-class mail, and a directive for an applicant to maintain any required on-site notification has been included. The notice process in the townhome exemption development section will be moved to the new notice section. The administrative adjustment notification will be made consistent with the timeline of all other notice in Title 20 at 15 days rather than 20. And the necessity of an applicant to notice surrounding parcels of a proposed accessory dwelling unit will be removed, but staff will continue to notice surrounding parcels when an ADU is approved. So the last group of amendments is a miscellaneous category and includes various amendments without a common theme. The first two changes occur in the overlay district chapter. The first will rectify an oversight in the Airway Boulevard Corridor subdistrict of the Missoula Development Park overlay zone, and will incorporate the use light equipment sales rentals into the district. And the second amendment will clarify that glazing is not included in the calculation of material coverage for a development going through a design excellence review, and that change will reflect current practice. The adoption of Title 20 in 2009 removed the need for new enterprise commercial overlays by making EC uses either permitted or conditional. And in 2018, the existing older EC overlays were removed from the zoning map. The regulations need to reflect these changes, and irrelevant language will be removed from the use and building standards chapter. There's been confusion about when a project is subject to the hillside protection regulations and is subject to the chapter which sections apply to which types of projects. The applicability section of the hillside protection section will be clarified by specifying which sections of the regulations apply to which types of projects. There are two proposed amendments in the landscape chapter. The first provides additional guidance for developers when they propose to include garden area as part of their required landscaping in a multi-dwelling project. Amendments were proposed by the Parks Department and, among other things, require access to a centrally located water bib and that the garden be in an area receiving adequate light. The second amendment is in the alternative compliance section, which has an exemption for meeting the letter of the chapter by allowing a landscape architect to create an alternate landscaping plan. This amendment asks for an explanation of how a proposed landscape plan provided by a landscape architect will meet the intent of the landscape chapter. An amendment in the administration chapter will allow design review board members to reside either in the city or outside the city limits, making recruiting and retention of these voluntary positions easier. And then the last proposed amendment will include language in the use classification section, allowing utility services to place on site any type of equipment necessary to allow the facility to function properly. And this last slide addresses the proposed conditional use amendments and a staff recommended change. So initially, the reason for pursuing the changes to the conditional use process were aimed at decoupling design review from conditional use approval, and as a chance to refocus on the impacts of a specific use on a site. Staff's been engaged in additional internal conversations about what will result from these amendments, including how the current conditional use review process would be affected, and has come to the conclusion that the issue these proposed amendments are trying to solve for are better served through a more comprehensive amendment process at a later date. We need to take more time to explore the additional details. So for that reason, staff is recommending removing the conditional use set of amendments from this process. And those are amendments numbered 18 through 22 that are shown in the draft ordinance that's dated September 14th. So therefore, staff is recommending that you refer to and adopt the changes shown in the updated draft ordinance dated September 30th, 2020. And this is the proposed motion staff is recommending for City Council's final consideration, which will be on October 19th, which is approval of the package conditioned for ordinance dated 9/30/2020. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you, Ms. Gress and Ms. James. And I will open the public hearing on the proposed amendments to Title 20, our municipal zoning code. Sorry, I have a barking dog is what I have. My apologies. I have Mr. Larson.
Yes, thank you. I don't hear any amendments to the issue regarding Airbnb. And I hear a lot of the gutting of Title 20 as it was as the place to call home plan was sold to us, which was to factor in very carefully the effects on infrastructure and the effects on all of the roads and everything and the parking, and it's all just being taken away now. And so I think that we need to realize what we're doing here. And it's effectively just gonna spike the taxable values of all this place. So, you know, we got to watch out. What good does this do, especially when we're just going to be creating essentially non-owner occupied units, and essentially we need to put a ban on Airbnb as soon as possible. We're seeing the commercialized like influx of out-of-state buyers now, and this is just exacerbating the problem, kind of. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket. We need to make significant changes, and we do need to build out as well as up. And building up in all the economic factors costs more, you know, and infill costs more than what it costs to build out here sensibly. So we need to look at that, because we're essentially just creating a stagnant market right now where only mega developments are feasible, either on the county or on the city level. I mean, this is great, I guess, from that standpoint, in that this is in people's backyards, but it's not protected as it should be. And the notification day, 15 days of notification, is ridiculous. Like, offers no time or no input for your neighbors to you know, be aware of what's actually going on. So that's all I have to say.
And seeing no additional attendees who care to comment at this time, that public hearing will remain open as well. Our third public hearing this evening is on updates to Title 12 in Missoula Municipal Code. And our staff report this evening comes from Mr. Slovart.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me and see me?
We can.
Okay, well, I will share my screen, and I have a brief PowerPoint presentation to go over. So, Title 12 updates, and I'll go through those briefly. So there's 5 chapters being considered. Chapter 1201, General Provisions, is a new chapter. Chapter 1202 is entitled Definitions. It's a new chapter. 1212 is existing, is called Curb, Sidewalks, and Paving. But we are proposing to create a new chapter, 1210, entitled Right-of-Way Improvements. The 4th chapter is proposing creating a new chapter, 1217, called Parking Facilities, from the existing 1222 parking facilities. And then lastly, there are some language changes, code changes in chapter 1228 entitled Obstructions. So the purpose for the updates is for each of these chapters, or chapter 1201 allows for the Missoula City Public Works Standards and Specifications Manual to be adopted as an administrative rule. With the adoption of that particular admin rule and others adopted with 1201, they will be enforced as a municipal infraction, a civil and not a criminal penalty. And so those are the two big things for chapter 1201. In chapter 1202, there were multiple definitions of the same term located in various chapters within Title 12. So what we will do with this new chapter is ensure one definition per term. What was interesting about that is multiple definitions of the same term in various chapters, and all those definitions weren't the same for some reason. So we're going to rectify that with a new definitions chapter. We had chapters 1210 and 1217 right-of-way improvements of parking facilities respectively. There are a number of reasons why, number of purposes for the updates of these two chapters. One is recent changes to the TED requirements. Another is proposed changes to titles 20 and 15, and you heard some of that from Jen just a few minutes ago. Additionally, creation of the Missoula City Public Works Standards and Specifications Manual allowed or provided a need for some changes in Title 12 and in these chapters specifically. Further understanding of state law that didn't necessarily allow city engineering to review and enforce ADA regulations, and Jen mentioned that previously also. In addition, staff's desire for requirements in Title 12 to apply in all cases. So subdivisions, TED, site development, zoning compliance permits, et cetera. We want to have one general set of standards and specifications for both design and construction for each of these types of developments. Now, certainly we do have subdivision regulations that still are in effect and enforceable, and we will continue to do that. The Title 12 changes that we've proposed do not change that fact. So we will still be enforcing subdivision regulations as needed for those engineering requirements. And lastly, to increase clarity related to frequently asked questions from consultants. So, and then finally, 1228 obstructions. We propose to align the code with nationally recognized site visibility standards contained within AASHTO, which is a policy on geometric design of highway and streets. So the process to date, many hours of staff time went into updating these chapters. Chapters 1210 and 17 have been sent out to internal stakeholders, including the Parks Department. Staff has incorporated those internal stakeholder comments as applicable. We've finalized drafts of these chapters for last week's Public Works Committee meeting. And we have identified or put these chapters out on the Engage Missoula site to receive external stakeholder comments, and we haven't received any of those. And I think a lot of that is due to the recent external stakeholder review of the Public Works Manual that contains a lot of the same type of information, although it's not the same. Code is more about the why, and the manual is more about the what and the how. And then my last slide is next steps, which is to receive city council approval for new chapters 1201, 1202, 1210, 1217, although 1210 and 1217 are lots of revisions, and then new code language to 1228. And then lastly, I wanted to mention, we want to bring back Title 12 chapters 1228, 1232, and 1248 back to city council for approval once engineering and park staff has completed edits to those other chapters. So wanted to mention that as part of the public hearing. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Slovart. And with that, I will open a public hearing on updates to Title 12. And I see no attendees who are interested in commenting. This public hearing will remain open, as will the rest, until council's next meeting on October 19th. We have no additional public hearings this evening. We do have one item for final consideration, and that comes from the Public Safety and Health Committee, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am juggling the multiple screens. So in public safety and health, we are going to have the first reading and preliminarily adopt to set a public hearing on October 19th, 2020, and preliminarily adopt an ordinance of the Missoula City Council creating Title 8, Chapter 8.
Nope. You're jumping the gun a little bit, Ms. Anderson. I'm looking for a motion.
Oh, sorry.
Grant.
Okay. Isn't the motion, recommended motion is to set a public hearing for October 19th?
Ms. Anderson, this is the item under 9, final consideration.
The JAG grant.
Yeah, sorry. You're right. I am jumping ahead. Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. Get it together today. I approve a memorandum of understanding for the 2020 Edward J. Byrne Justice Assistance Grant between the City of Missoula and Missoula County to accept funding for the electronic controlled weapons and computer software programs and offset Missoula County's property clerk wages in the total amount of $58,440.
That motion is in order. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none and seeing no hands up among the attendees, Ms. Rabine will have a roll call vote.
Okay, on the MOU for the JAG grant, Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Vasika,
Yes.
Von Lossberg,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
and Anderson.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? It's 11 ayes, 1 absent.
And the motion is approved. I will pass on communications from the mayor and we'll begin comments from council members with Ms. Vasika.
Thank you. I just have something very short to say tonight. It's come to my attention that last week somebody threatened one of our council members because they disagreed on on a political issue that was going on. And you should, no matter where you stand, what side of the aisle you're on, if you are for or against something, you should never threaten somebody because of that or for any reason. You should never threaten them, threaten their family, or threaten to impose violence on them. Not only does it not even bring the conversation to the table, it is just completely inappropriate. And I do not condone that at all. Thank you.
Ms. Becerra.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Mr. Hess.
Yes, thanks.
Ms. Anderson.
I will pass. Thank you.
Ms. West. Ms. Sherrill.
Pass, thanks.
Ms. Jones.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Mr. Von Lossberg.
Pass.
Ms. Hart.
Thank you. I will take a couple moments, but first I want to say thank you, Sandy, for your comments. I think in today's day and age, I think it's really important that both sides or all people recognize the need to treat one another with kindness and respect. So thank you. October, sorry, 4 years ago in October, I had both my knees replaced, and I wanted to thank you to all the medical professionals that really turned my life around and helped heal me. And I want to say thank you to the entire medical community for taking such good care of us Missoulians. I know through this pandemic, it has really been, it's been tough. And as we see our numbers doubling, it, I'm sure, sends fear through your veins as it does me. I'm worried as much as you are. And there are times where I wonder, when will someone in my immediate circle be affected by the virus? But I want you to know that this community has your back and that there is a sea of others beside me who feel the exact same way, whether they are my family, my friends, my colleagues, my neighbors, my fellow hockey players, my fellow service club members. But more importantly, all of us citizens are behind you on this. And we appreciate your stamina, your commitment, your dedication, and most importantly, the courage that you perform each day to take care of us, even in the face of indifference. So without you, we are toast. So please, everyone, wear a mask, do your part to protect one another, and let us help heal the healers. Thank you.
Mr. Contos.
Pass.
And Mr. Ramos.
Pass.
All right, we will move on then to committee reports. Items here were not approved unanimously in committees, and we take a vote tonight after the chairperson of each of these committees makes a motion. We only have one committee report this evening, and Ms. Anderson, you're up.
Broken clocks right twice a day. So eventually it was going to get to this point. So we are taking a vote to set a public hearing on October 19th and preliminarily adopt an ordinance of the Missoula City Council creating Title 8, Chapter 8.38 of the Missoula Municipal Code entitled Restrictions on the Display of Tobacco Products and the Sale of Flavored Tobacco Products.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. That motion is in order. Is there discussion on the motion with the reminder that we are merely setting public hearing this evening? Public hearing will happen on the 19th. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none. Would anyone in the audience, we've got a lot of folks here this evening, I see on the line, but this is not the opportunity to comment on the ordinance. The question before the body tonight is whether to set a public hearing for the 19th so we can hear what you have to say with regard to the ordinance. So that's what is before the body. And Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I can speak to the motion itself tonight. As you'll recall from a lot of our interactions in the past with the councils, I do try and make a point to be a good citizen and get in front of you folks when there's a topic that's going to affect the business that I run. And so I have something of a point of order, or maybe more of a point of disappointment, that You know, the council action summary from the 28th had no mention that the folks in the health and safety committee were going to look at this on the 30th. I only found out from an online report that said it had been discussed after the fact. And I don't believe council took the input of myself or my colleagues. And I think that's especially important on something that's going to affect our business. Public hearings, you know, everybody's limited to 3 minutes, and I'm desperately trying to keep under that here. But in committees, if I recall right, there's a little more of an open discussion or a little more of a chance to get some information in front of the council. And I don't think that the council has been well informed to do well informed legislating yet. And I think they'll instead, with what this is, it's going to be a broad overreach, broad brush. You know, we've got 30 some employees. They work very hard to keep tobacco out of the hands of kids. There's some misnomers in there about how things are in front of the counter. We don't have that in our stores. I mean, we work on spot and fake IDs and making sure clerks refuse sales and third-party sales. I mean, I don't even think that the council has understood that the FDA is much more involved now. There's you know, we have like a 97% or better pass rate in compliance checks. The FDA is now involved in that and involved in inspections of the stores. And that involves, just like the alcohol laws, where there are progressive fines and more things where we could lose our license or even our ability to get products from manufacturers. I'm not sure that the council realizes that the federal age limit went from 18 to 21 in December. And so a lot of the third-party transfers and access to high schoolers and that kind of thing has changed just in this year. Plus, the FDA has had more regulations put in place, one federal court cases to actually pull and limit products. And I'm not sure the council heard about that in detail. And I'm not sure we can properly cover it in just, you know, a couple, 3 minutes apiece here. So I would ask at the very least that the council return this to committee and, you know, work with those of us in the local retail community and get a better picture before moving forward. I mean, there's national things which create a level playing field. And those of us in local retailer, you know, feel that we need more of an opportunity to explain that, because, you know, Missoula has the potential to offer the citizens, the customers, people who can buy these products. It offers another reason for them to go out of the county. I mean, Florence is less than a half hour away, or out of state. Idaho's less than a couple hours away. So I think more of an open discussion is needed. And I would ask that at the very least, council return this to committee. Thank you. You're muted, sir.
Sorry, a little challenge with the barking dog tonight. Mr. Allen, would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Hi, my name is Earl Allen, E-A-R-L-A-L-L-E-N. I'm the marketing manager of your 3 Noons food stores and High Noon Petroleum here in Missoula.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And I have someone identified only as John.
Good evening, councilors. Mayor England. Probably a poor choice in selection here because I am actually the sales manager for Noon Stores. My name is John Monahan. So I'll be very concise. Earl covered quite a few points. I would just ask that we move this proposal back to committee as well. And primarily one of the issues that I have with it is the findings that are listed on the proposal. Quite honestly, are really outdated and somewhat misleading. I think that we deserve an opportunity to defend ourselves against some of those claims. I personally take offense at finding number 19 that states that we place our products within reach of candy and gum. And that's not the case. Matter of fact, that is from a study in 2004. That's why I think it's somewhat misleading. And I think that just, I'd sent several of you letters. I'd invite you to our stores to see exactly what is going on in the community. And I'm all for the intent of the proposal. Don't take me wrong there. I'm a grandfather of four kids, but I think that we need to have an honest, open discussion as to how to address the ability of getting product, tobacco and quite frankly, alcohol in the hands of minors. So if you could just consider moving this back to committee and let's have an open discussion, visit our stores. I'd love to have you come down and tour the stores, meet some of our employees, see what we are required to comply with, and move forward from there. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. We're getting a little bit far afield in comments from whether or not we should set a public hearing. So I'd ask callers to sort of think about that as they step up to the virtual microphone. And Ms. Page Nye.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. For the record, my name is Kristen Page Nye. I'm a Missoula resident, a mother of a teen, and the Montana Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. I wanted to take a moment to thank Councilmember Becerra and the Public Safety and Health Committee for bringing this motion forward. I ask you to support setting this hearing date before the full City Council. I look forward to making the case for this ordinance. And just to reassure you, this is exactly the governing body that should be taking this up. There was a lot of talk of other appropriate bodies, but quite honestly, most of the work on preventing kids from being hooked on tobacco products has started at the local level. I look forward to making this case when you set the hearing.
Thank you. And I have a caller. Last four numbers are 1440. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
I'm Keith Bowman. I'm the owner of the e-cig vapor juice store. I'd also like this to go back to committee. I strongly oppose it. A couple of the other members brought up the federal government raised the age to 21. None of our products are out where anybody can reach them. We are audited by checked by the ATF routinely all the time. Even after they raise the age to 21, the ATF checks us probably regularly, couple, 3-4 times a month. Basically, with this is going to probably close. And I understand that this is going to that you're wanting to get this so you go to a vote and everything. I know that's what the subject is, but if this even goes there and even being considered to go for a vote, after we've got through COVID or getting through COVID and everything we're doing to get through COVID,
And we lost the caller, but we're at about 3 minutes. And Mr. Larson, on the question of whether to set a public hearing.
Yeah. I'd like to also just double down on the public commentary you're hearing. And I would argue that this is relevant because this is such a bad idea. It shouldn't even be set to public hearing. There's just so many more evil things out in the world you could be focusing on, and even more benign ones that you're not focusing on. The jail, the disproportionate populations in the jail that are Native people, the drunk driving that's supported for Grizz games and basically state sanctioned. It's not a priority. It's flavored tobacco. It's existed forever. vaping stuff. It's just going to push business out of your county, and it's not going to do anything to prevent it. People just order it online anyway. And there's literally no regulation that can, you know, stop it. It doesn't need to be focused on, in my opinion. Thank you.
And I have a caller. Last four numbers are 5495. Caller 5495.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'd like to thank the council for taking the time to listen to everybody this evening. My name is Tom Eshelman, and I'd like the council to reconsider this. One thing that they're relying on is some very old data that's 10 years old, several years old. There have been so many more improvements within the wholesale community and the retail community on stopping access for young underage kids in this day and age that I think they need to take that into account. Also, the FDA has implemented a lot stricter rules for everyone on the retail side. And these people that are the business people in Missoula, they don't want to sell to kids. They don't sell beer to kids. And I think what we have to do is sit down and re-examine this and know that the federal government has stepped up and put more laws into place. And the people that are in the community, they're the ones that are stopping the kids. The other thing that you don't take into account is the ease of the access of the internet. You know, the kids can get on there and they're all tech savvy. They can have it in a heartbeat. And all it's going to be is a disproportionate burden on the Missoula people that are paying taxes. It's going to cost jobs. And I think that we need to really, really take a hard look at this. I think it's an unneeded law because the federal government has stepped up to do this. And also the people in the community, they aren't selling to kids these days. So I think that we need to probably shelve this or have it go back to committee. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you. So a couple of things I want to clarify in terms of process. The motion before the body is to set a public hearing. Returning it to committee would just be another conversation about setting a public hearing. So what council is considering this evening is listening to all of you on the substance of the ordinance on the 19th, and we'll have plenty of time for that. But once again, I would prefer that we didn't talk about the merits of the ordinance this evening, just whether or not you think there ought to be a public hearing. And I appreciate your patience. And I have Michelle A. And you appear to be muted.
How's that?
Now we got you.
All right, my apologies. My name is Michelle Arthur. I am the tobacco category manager for Town Pump. Formerly almost a Missoula citizen. I was over in Lolo and Florence for about 17 years, just moved back to Butte, born and raised in Butte. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for having me tonight. And the previous people that have already spoken have said some things that I just wanted to mention. And I guess I just want to extend the invite, just as Noons has, as far as if anybody would like to come in and see our stores and look at the processes and see what it actually looks like and how responsible we are in the sales of alcohol and tobacco. I would definitely come over. We have people that are local there that would be happy to meet with any of you guys, name the time and place. You know, we are, and as some of our other local convenience stores in Missoula, I think we're all very responsible. We're some of the leaders in the state of Montana. We have worked closely with the state of Montana in creating training programs that are out there for both carding for tobacco and alcohol. And I just want to say, you know, as far as the product being out there for the kids, that is not a true statement. Again, I welcome you to come in and take a look. That some of the things that were mentioned in the notes, and I know you didn't want to get into the merit, but I just will say this unicorn coat flavor and Candy King, some of that was mentioned. I've never even heard of those. I would guess you get those online. And as far as this being banned in the city of Missoula, the kids can go online. I tried it today. It took me less than 5 minutes. So again, if anybody would like to come visit, and I would be happy to help as a part of the solution. I mean, we definitely don't want alcohol or tobacco in the hands of our kids. I have a couple of kids myself, so I totally understand. And thank you.
Thank you. And I have Mr. Longcake.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brad Longcake. I'm the director for the Montana Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association. I want to thank you just for the opportunity to highlight some of the challenges that we think this particular ordinance brings. And again, without getting into any of the details, I think some of the other members and individuals have brought up some very good comments. I think the biggest thing that I've taken from listening just to the comments recently is that there was a lack of stakeholder feedback, especially from the retailers. I think of convenience stores as the gold standard in terms of carding and making sure and inspecting that we're not selling products that are inappropriate to either tobacco or alcohol related. I think the bigger issue here on this and why I think that this should just be tabled in general is it's more of an e-commerce issue. Our brick and mortar buildings and facilities in these communities, are pillars in the community. We try to strive to do the best. Each owner tries to do the best that they can. They're not out to sell products that are inappropriate to individuals and kids. And I think at this point, especially with COVID and the challenges that these local businesses have faced, to add on something else on top of this, it just doesn't seem like it's the appropriate time. I would too echo the sentiments of both Nunes and Town Pump that if any of the members on the committee would like to come to any of our stores that are in our association and see what they do on a day-to-day basis, look at the age verification process they do, the training they go through, the location of the products, I think that would debunk 90% of the issues that have been brought forth. And I just don't think at this time it's something that the citizens of Missoula are willing to tackle, especially with the economic crisis that we're in. So again, I thank you for the time and happy to answer any questions or comments. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I just want to speak to having this move to full hearing. The process has been very thorough. We've been to the Board of Health twice. We had a committee hearing initially, and then a robust hearing last week. All city council members were there. It's been a broad public process, and it's important that we move forward now, particularly since COVID. It's important that we address this problem of flavored cigarettes. So I look forward to the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Schaefer.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I just want to point something out really quick. I've been on the front line at the stores. I'm the retail general manager for Great Western Petroleum, and I've been working literally at the register all summer long. And a lot of things I'm seeing are people who are taking this pandemic pretty seriously, and they're really, really stressed out. And I'm worried that if we get rid of cigarettes, I mean, this includes menthols, chew, whatever, that they're going to take out that frustration and anger on the kids at home. I don't think this is really going to affect the kids at all. We did a great job raising the age limit to 21. I think that helped a ton. We got it out of the high schools, but I am really worried. I've just seen it. A lot of parents, yeah. I'm just really worried about the kids at home if the parents aren't able to use what they normally do. And flavors don't mean they're just for kids. We have people that buy watermelon beer. So I just want to point that out. Thank you for hearing me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And someone just identified as Bears Tea.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes, I'd just like to point out that the gentleman stated that there's been plenty of hearings on this. And through everything I've found out in the last 4 days, I don't think there's any retailer, business, or consumer that was involved in the process from June up to this point. And I think that's very clear what everybody's trying to say, why this needs to go back to committee. I don't know that that I can find that any business group or retailer group was involved in the whole report to push this out of committee. Thank you.
And your name for the record, please, sir?
Tom Beers.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Bunch. Ms. Bunch. Ms. Bunch. Ms. Bunch. We appear to be having a technical difficulty. I have no one else in the audience. Oh, no, I do. All right, folks, we're just setting a public hearing. Caller 1440.
Yeah, this is Keith Bowman, the owner of the E-Cig Vapor Juice Store. I'd like to apologize. My phone got disconnected. I'm for tabling this. This same exact bill has been brought up in front of in Helena and the Capitol numerous times and been voted down. Yeah, I'd absolutely like this to be tabled. It's not the right time with COVID and everything that we've had going on. The age limit has been raised, and I think that, yeah, it needs to be tabled, and now is not the time for this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bobby Guman, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Bobby Guman, and I'm the owner of Jay's. We got 3 stores, me and my partner, Jesse Sandu. We own these stores. And I would like to request you guys to please bring us into the loop too, because we're the one who are getting affected with this. And seems like we're getting punished for something we're not doing. We're responsible business owners doing business from last 12 years. And I think we should be involved in this. We have kids. We don't like to sell to minors, and with the 21-year age, it's even better. Like, FDA is on it. We have all the programs, like we make our employees certified. And if we go with this, it can create like the black market and all that. So I think we should consider taking that to the committee, please. Thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. And Yvonne Bunch. Hello, Ms. Bunch. Something's just not working there. With that, we have no additional hands up among the attendees, and we've had council discussion on the motion. We'll have a roll call vote.
Okay, we'll start this round with Contos.
No.
Harp.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones. Jones.
Yes.
Ramos.
No.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasika.
No.
Van Lossberg,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That's 8 ayes, 3 nays, and 1 absent.
And the public hearing is set for the 19th. We have no additional committee reports nor any new business this evening. Are there any additional items to be referred?
Mayor Engen, we do have a late breaking item that we'll be adding, so I would like to announce it. We need to hold a public safety and health committee meeting on the 14th to consider an amendment to one of the, is it the People's Market bylaws or the Winter Market bylaws?
It's the winter market, so they can change locations temporarily.
Not their bylaws, their resolution that authorizes their location. So we'll be adding that to the agenda and referring that to public safety and health. Look for another meeting for public safety and health on the 14th. We'll publish that committee schedule this Friday. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. We have no miscellaneous communications, petitions, reports, or announcements. As always, I thank you for your service, and we will be adjourned.